I'm going to welcome up our next speaker, who is Simon Sharp. He's the CRO at SureCloud. He's going to be talking about sweet equity, exploring an alternative to stock options as a leadership incentive. Quick intro and a bit of information about Simon. He's an international business leader with a passion for fraud and cyber security. There you go. Who knew? Passion for fraud sounds a bit interesting if you isolate that bit, doesn't it? A wealth of experience as a sales leader. He's spanned over 15 years across companies including Entrust, RSA, Pindrop Security, Cyber Reason, and Observe IT, and now obviously SureCloud. And Simon also co-founded Risk Exchange, an AI-assisted platform designed to help companies identify and manage their cybersecurity in real time. Would you please welcome Simon to the stage? Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Hope you're having a good time enjoying the talk so far. I'm certainly learning a thing or two from the speakers, so thanks very much for that. That's been great. Radical candor, that's the key thing there, I think. But James has asked me to come on stage tonight just to talk to everyone a bit about sweet equity. I wanted to tie this in with more of a broader talk pattern around the importance of sales incentives as well as recognition for people. And I think that everyone's been touching on that so far throughout the presentation so far this evening. So, you know, we're working in a world that's very challenging. I know James mentioned that at the top there. You know, some people are calling it a bear market, you know, a downturn. You know, it is very, very tough for us all out there. And it's obviously super important for us all to remember that we need to keep ourselves, but also the whole team motivated in the best ways we can. That can't be understated, right? It's all about the people and the employees and the sales teams that you have that's always going to be able to take you out of these times we're living in right now, right? And everyone's finding it tough. So the question, you know, we're asking ourselves is, how do we keep everybody motivated? We're retaining our best talent, our top performers. You know, how's the best way of we're doing this, right? Now, actually, the best way of doing this is trying to create intrinsic value for people, you know, and the sellers and the teams and basically anybody actually is going to be able to drive themselves, get the best out of themselves, achieve their goals by having that intrinsic value and that meaningful, purposeful satisfaction. Okay, so that's the first thing I would say. And research has proven this. You know, there's many people that have touched on this subject, including, you know, Abraham Maslow, if you go back to the 60s, where, you know, we're talking about the need for self-actualization and ultimately finding meaning and purpose in the work that you do, right? So, you know, my recommendation would always be to create an environment where people can do their best work and they're feeling that they've got that meaningful and that purpose every day they come into the office, right? So that's definitely number one. I guess the cherry on the cake, though, is then you move more on to what we call extrinsic value, where this probably falls more into the commission schemes, the cash, the non-cash incentives that we put out there. You know, everyone's familiar with commission schemes and special incentives, spiffs, president's clubs. You know, all of these things are key, that we've got to remember that these are super important, even if we are feeling the pinch and we feel like we're not in a position where cash is free flowing in our businesses, right? So it's super important to always keep that in mind. Learning programs, development, self-development, career progression, you know, these are all key things to drive not only extrinsic benefits for employees, but obviously coming back to the intrinsic value that is paramount. A lot of companies, particularly obviously the early stage companies, startups, scale-ups, will offer equity as an additional incentive in that way, right? And I think most people will be familiar with the terms of stock options, restricted stock units, RSUs, right? And they're super important to make sure that you're able to attract, in the first place, on board and retain top talent within your businesses, right? So it's super important to be able to offer those to individuals within your business and give back, right? It's super important. Now, I wanted to just go down the road, and I was talking to James a couple of weeks ago when we were at the NED, where I touched on this concept of sweet equity, not sweat equity, which is, if you Google it, sometimes it doesn't know which way you're going with this. But essentially, I'm not sure if anybody's heard of the term sweet equity, as in SWEET. Is anybody familiar with that? I wasn't overly familiar with it, to be honest, until I joined SureCloud just over a year or so ago. And basically, what it is, it's offered by typically early stage companies that are private equity backed, and it's part of an ordinary share. So basically, companies are able to offer some substantial reward by offering ordinary shares or equity in the business when you join the company, and it's typically between 1 to 5, 1 to 6% of the company, right? So this is life-changing, potentially life-changing amounts of money to be offered sweet equity in a business, right? And they are typically, as I say, private equity backed. Now, there needs to be an event for you to get that. There needs to be a liquidity event, i.e., some type of acquisition or an IPO. There needs to be something that happens, and that typically happens quite quickly with private equity firms because everyone's looking to grow really fast, and you've got typically 2 to 3 year cycles where you do see events, right? So it's super important if you can to get that. And, we're not talking, small amounts of money. Most people are making, maybe 7, maybe even 8 figures as part of that, depending on how successful the company is, right? And that's paid out after preference capital, right? So it's part of ordinary shares, so it essentially means you get a share of the growth of the profit or the gain, the upside in any of these companies, right? So I thought it was just interesting to share that concept if anybody's not familiar with it. And it's, it's obviously a big thumbs up to private equity firms and the ones that, go and seek those companies out, and put yourself forward, because that's absolutely, a great way to, as I say, attract, retain top performers within the business and just give everyone that goal and that motivation, even in the bad times, to be able to help grow the company. So what I'd say, from a takeaway perspective is, we're just trying to make sure that we're all fully motivated. The team has got everything to go after. Number one always comes back to intrinsic value, right? You've got to make sure that you create a work environment where people can find meaning and purpose and satisfaction in their day-to-day work and day-to-day business, right? That is definitely number one. Number two, extrinsic value in the form of cash and non-cash commission schemes, flows, compensation, recognition. Go one step further, offer stock options, RSUs, but if you can get to sweet equity or private equity, even better. And then thirdly, and create that culture and that environment where you just create an environment where you can continually develop your career, learn, feel safe, drive happiness and well-being and fulfillment in your day-to-day work, right? Because it's the journey that counts, not the final destination that sometimes we all forget about. Thank you.